Welcome to Discourse. That's Abel.
It's Tony.
And today we're talking about the Last Duel movie compared to the book. So we both read the Last Duel book, and I went to the theater yesterday and saw the Last Duel in theater, and it was amazing. I really liked it. I'm sure history buffs will pick it apart, but I thought it was shot really well, and the way they told that story, they did it very compellingly. So in the book, there's not a lot of action, really. It's more of an explanation of events that happen. They explain how de Carrouges goes to war at different moments, but they don't explain his experiences in war, at least in depth. But in the movie, we do get some action.
And it's de Carrouges, not de Carrouges, right?
Yeah, so in our last review of the book, we didn't know how to say it. So I think we were messing it all up, but in the movie, they call him de Carrouges. And Adam Driver is fantastic as Gris. I didn't imagine him, when I was reading the book, I didn't really imagine him as like Adam Driver, but Adam Driver's great. Matt Damon really pulls off de Carrouges, although I think Matt Damon looks a little too good to be de Carrouges, because in the book they made de Carrouges seem more of like a brute.
Like battle worn and probably looking older than he actually was, right? Because of his battles and everything he's been through.
Yeah, where Matt Damon just still, it looks a little too handsome behind all that scruff. Ben Affleck's pretty good. He has a minor part on the side, but he plays the Duke really well.
Oh, okay, thank God. I thought he was going to play the king, and that deserted too old to be this young king that was in the book.
Yeah, exactly. In the book, the king is young. Even in the movie, the king is young.
Okay, so they got that right.
Yeah, in the movie, the king is like this 16-year-old boy, and he really is like this 16-year-old boy just waiting to see like some action. Like he's bored and he wants to see people fight, and that really comes across in that actor.
Okay, so I think that was about the same in the book then.
Yeah,
I would say, right?
So the story in the movie is the same story told three different ways, like from three different perspectives.
In the movie?
So they tell the same story three times. One of them's from Gris's perspective, one of them is from de Carrouges' perspective, and then the last one, de Carrouges, sorry. The last one is from Marguerite's perspective. And I like the way they do it because they say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3.
Okay.
And they say every chapter, the truth according to de Carrouges, the truth according to Gris. And then the last chapter is the truth according to Marguerite. But when they fade it out, the truth, the words, stay on there just a bit longer for you to know that they're hinting at this is more than likely the truth. And then her story is the one at the very end, and it's a lot more the rape scene, which is very uncomfortable, especially to see with a bunch of strangers in theater.
Oh, they actually show it?
Yeah, they show it,
Wow.
and it's a lot more brutal from her aspect, which is very interesting to see the comparison of that same rape scene played out in Adam Driver's character, Gris, and how he sees that rape scene. It is so
Two different perspectives.
Bizarre to see the same rape, but from a different perspective.
Because I know in the book they talk about Marguerite and how she didn't really have a voice, right? She was the accuser, but back then women were just, they weren't believed, you know.
They were property.
Yeah.
No better than a horse.
And de Carrouges had to prove what she was claiming. So how did they show it in the movie?
Yeah, that played out really well, actually. They left a lot of details out, but I understand why. Just, you know, to keep things moving, you don't really need to get bogged down in a lot of the details. But they did a really good job, at least from Marguerite's perspective, of showing how she needed to get her husband on board. He could have easily just killed her and not been put on trial, but he didn't.
Okay.
He goes to court for her, challenges him, but you start to realize that, or somewhere in the beginning, you realize that he's not necessarily going to court to fight for her. He's going to court to fight for himself, because as you know, Gris has always like stolen things from him, right? He always feels like Gris is stealing stuff from him. And this is just another thing that he's stolen from de Carrouges. He doesn't see it as something that happened to his wife. He sees it as something that happened to him.
Something else that Gris did
just
to him.
So like self-centered. And I thought it was perfect. It's a perfect display of how things were very male-dominated and male-centered, and women were just like off to the side. And I was blown away with how well they portray that.
Okay. Yeah, so far it sounds like they really covered the book as it was.
Yeah,
They didn't.
I'm glad they skipped over the trial. Because as you know in the book, it was a little dry to read all of like the technical.
Oh, the trial, yeah, that
Yeah.
took a while, and then they had to wait for the king, right?
Yeah, and then it almost didn't happen, right? If I remember right, like the king had to go to war, and they're like, "Well, the king needs to be here for the duel to happen."
Mm-hmm.
And then the king comes back, and the king's like this young boy, so he's like, "I'm bored. What happened to those two dudes that were supposed to fight it out? Yeah, get those guys back here. Let's see what happens."
Yeah, short notice.
And so they end up dueling. So the duel at the end is done really well as well. And I think I had mentioned this in our last review. In the book, they say that nobody can make any sound at this duel.
Oh, yeah, because they make a sound making one side more. What is that?
Cheering for one side.
If they cheer for one side and then give them more like adrenaline, more of an advantage, you know, they would kill like people in the audience, right? Supposedly.
Yeah, you would break the law. Essentially, you would go to prison or lose your life or lose your money or something like that. So they basically said you have to be silent. And of course, in the movie, it is definitely not like that.
The opposite.
They're semi-quiet, and then somewhere towards the end of the battle, they just straight up start cheering for the Carrouges character.
And the king allows it?
The king is one of the ones that are cheering.
What? Yeah, and just so you know, we're not gonna spoil who won, but during this duel, someone has to win. You know, there has to be a winner, and whoever it is, accuser or accused, they were right by God. So, in their eyes, you know.
Oh my God. So that's one thing this movie does really well. In the book, we conceptually knew that Marguerite was on trial in Paris, in the Palace of Justice, being questioned by lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
You read it, you don't, at least I didn't really fully comprehend how much pressure she was under. In the movie, you get a better idea of her being surrounded by a bunch of old dudes, asking her a bunch of dumb questions and harsh questions too. For example, they ask her in front of hundreds of people, "Did you like it?"
What kind of question is that?
God, it was so rough. And you could see the pain in her eyes. The actress really brings that out. And I really, really appreciated her acting in that moment because you can feel all the pain and pressure she was under to be asked all of these really dumb questions by people who thought you only got pregnant from a rape if you enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed it, it was no longer rape. What?
I remember reading that, something about that in the book, right?
Yeah, I think they had mentioned some questions that they asked, but not all of them.
Man, that is crazy.
So in the movie, like the lawyers are trying to get her to admit that she liked it because if she liked it, it was no longer rape.
Case over.
So she's pregnant in the movie, just like in the book.
And they don't know who's the dad, right?
They don't know who's the dad.
Yeah.
And again, medieval logic, they say that women cannot get pregnant if they get raped, right?
Yeah, it's not possible because your body's not accepting it, you know.
And second to that, women cannot get pregnant unless they enjoy it, right? So you can't get pregnant if you get raped. You can only get pregnant if you like it. You're pregnant, so obviously. And I'm just like, and this poor lady has to sit there in front of all these old dudes that believe this.
Answer the question.
And answer the question.
I guess it makes it more interesting in the movie because in the book, like you said, we can't really envision the pressure she's in. And seeing it in the movie, especially these old man lawyers questioning her, and it's like seriously?
Yeah, it really brings out the emotion of the events that happen. Because in the book, it's like more factual, right? It's like this happened, and then this happened, and then that happened.
Yeah.
So it's really like a factual recounting of events. Whereas the movie, it really brings out the emotion of everybody involved. Adam Driver's character as well, he's Gris, and you fully understand his emotional connection to Marguerite and why he did what he did. Not to excuse it, but you understand it.
Okay. He still has a little henchman or whatever it was.
Yeah, he has that henchman there. The rape scene doesn't play out exactly as it plays out in the book. Okay. I felt like it was a lot more violent in the book. Whereas in the movie, it was not as... And I don't know if it's not as violent or just not exactly as they described it in the book. Yeah. In either case, it's uncomfortable. And in either case, again, it's one of those things where you respect it, but it is tough to watch.
Definitely not no 50 Shades of Grey, right?
Yeah, so we get three aspects. Yeah, it's definitely not a 50 Shades of Grey where she's like, oh yeah, I love it. Oh, it's interesting that you say that though, because from Adam Driver's perspective, he kind of sees it as a 50 Shades of Grey situation. De Carrouges is not there when it happens. So when you see his perspective is the first one explained in the movie. And that's the first one that Priscilla saw. She never read the book. Mm-hmm. And when she saw his perspective, because they summarize it really quick, they give you everything right up front because it's all Matt Damon's perspective, De Carrouges' perspective. De Carrouges, sorry. And then they give you all Le Gris's perspective, where it's all the same events, but just told slightly different. And then it's Marguerite's perspective told slightly different.
So it's like the same scene, three different angles.
So when Priscilla watched just De Carrouges' perspective, she's like, this movie's lame. Like, they just gave me everything.
Yeah, but he wasn't even there.
Yeah, exactly. So when they show Marguerite, they don't show the rape scene in his perspective because he wasn't there. They just show her crying on Matt Damon's shoulders saying, I was raped. And then we go to trial and all of that. And I was kind of like, oh, wow, they're going to just skip over that. That's the emotional apex of the story.
Yeah.
I guess they're not going to cover it. But no, they cover it. It is tough.
All right. So I guess that's heads up to everyone that's going to go watch it.
If you're sensitive at all, don't watch this movie. It is tough.
But it is part of the book, part of the story, part of history. So in the book, De Carrouges and Le Gris are good friends in the beginning. Was that the same in the movie?
Yeah, they show that. Actually, and again, different perspectives. They show their friendship in different scenes, but those scenes of friendship are told slightly different. For example, in the beginning, they talk about how they both go to war.
Yeah.
And from De Carrouges' perspective, they go off into battle and De Carrouges saves Le Gris's life in battle. But when it's told from Le Gris's perspective, Le Gris saves De Carrouges' life in battle.
Great.
So you don't really know who to believe. And Marguerite doesn't give you that piece of the story because she wasn't there.
So it's all just different perspectives.
Yeah.
Another question that I have, just to see how they played it out in the movie, because I think this is an important part of why Le Gris might have done what he did. So when De Carrouges first introduces his new wife, young wife, to the nobles and all that, he introduces her to Le Gris in the book, and she kisses him on the lips. And you could tell he enjoyed it. And the book doesn't talk about her. So how did that go in the movie? Did they show that? And if they did, how was it? Was it like romantic, awkward?
Yes, they showed it in the movie, and it was very awkward. They show it 3 different times again. Just very slight change in perspective, but it really changes the tone of that scene.
Yeah.
And I felt like every single time was very awkward because in De Carrouges' perspective, it was just Marguerite giving Le Gris a kiss, and then it's over. From Le Gris's perspective, he kisses her, and it's like world-changing passion. And then from Marguerite's perspective, she kisses Le Gris, and then it's just super awkward. Like, he is like staring into her soul, and she's like,
she thought it was gonna be weird. She thought it was gonna be a simple hello kiss, but he locked.
Yeah, he locked eyes with her onto her soul.
Man. That's just awkward.
Yeah, it is super awkward. Well, her husband makes her do it, remember?
Oh, the kiss?
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
I forgot about that. He encourages it. But why? I forgot why.
Yeah, it's an old custom that basically says, I trust you enough to kiss my wife. Another interesting scene in there that speaks volumes with just one scene was there's a horse scene. And not the horse scene that you would think of we were laughing about.
The horse going on trial?
Yeah, horse going on trial in the last video. But no, this one, there's a scene where De Carrouges buys a female horse, and the idea is to breed her so that he can make money on the horses.
Okay.
But then another horse breaks into the stall and tries to have sex with the horse he just bought, basically rape the horse he just bought, and De Carrouges is sitting there beating the horse, the male horse, saying, get off of her. Right? You're going to waste my money.
What?
Get off of her. And then Marguerite's in the back, like horrified, like what is happening? And just that whole scene speaks volumes. It is like a parallel to everything that's happening, right? Because later on, you realize De Carrouges doesn't really see Marguerite as a wife. He sees her as the woman that's going to give him an heir. It's basically
to
it.
pass on his name, his property, his money.
And
'Cause,
even when he goes to trial, it's not for her.
okay, that's good. Because I always thought being Hollywood, they were just gonna romanticize and it's like this love story,
Yeah.
and they give women more rights. Because at that time, as mentioned, they were seen as property.
Yeah.
So I just want to see if they're gonna twist that or keep it like with the facts and as it was in history.
I think they stuck pretty close to the facts of the book. They left out some things just to, speed it up, not get bogged down in the details, I think.
Yeah.
But other than that, it stuck pretty close to the book and really did a great job of bringing out the emotions in the book where the book was just factual.
Because the book itself was pretty good, and the war scenes.
The war scenes
Battle
are great. They're not very long. They're kind of like very short, and they show them like rushing into battle and fighting really quick, and then that's it. Even the duel at the very end is kind of anticlimactic, especially if you read the book. You already know how it ends, but it wasn't as like intense, kind of like gladiator style fighting I thought it would be.
Oh, all right.
I mean, it was good. They definitely dueled till the death, but it just wasn't. I thought it was going to be Hollywood. They were going to amp it up. It was going to be very bloody. There was going to be a scene where they just look down and look up at each other with like squinty eyes, and
The
like
sun is setting, and they're still standing.
sun coming in, and there's just dirt flying, and then for some reason they take their shirt off and they both have six-pack abs. But it wasn't like that.
All right. All right. So it sounds like if you didn't read the book, you would definitely get the movie, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't need to read the book to get the movie. Yeah, you still
All right.
get it. Let us know what you think about the movie or the book or how those two come together in the comments. Thanks for watching.
Preferably in a residential area. Should be played at high volume.